31 years old and still begging? Pathetic. Dad brushed past me toward his Mercedes, leaving me on his spotless porch. I stood there, clothes reeking of smoke, with nowhere to go. 3 hours earlier, I'd watched everything I owned burn to ash. My apartment, clothes, photos, even my damn dog's ashes. The firefighter had just told me it was safe to leave the scene when I called my father. "You own 6 empty rental properties," I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. "I'm just asking for a couple weeks in one of them until I figure this out." Dad checked his watch. "The Bradleys are waiting." "I'm already late." He brushed past me to his Mercedes. "Call your sister if you need money for a hotel." The door clicked shut behind him. Methodical, calm, like I'd just stopped by to borrow a cup of sugar instead of having lost everything. I stood there in disbelief, fists clenched. This same man had inherited those properties from my grandfather 20 years ago. They'd put him through life on easy mode while he watched his co-workers struggle after their factory shut down. Some took custodial jobs, others worse. Thompson from accounting even killed himself. But not my father. He just collected checks while the buildings crumbled from neglect. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. My sister answered on the third ring. "Lisa? It's Ryan. My apartment burned down. Oh my God. Are you okay?" Her voice pitched with what seemed like genuine concern. "I'm alive. Everything else is gone." My throat tightened. "I was hoping to crash at your place tonight." The pause told me everything before she even spoke. "Ryan, we just got the baby's nursery set up in the guest room. There's literally nowhere for you to sleep." "The couch? Just for tonight." Another pause. "Dad called me already. Said you were being dramatic. Can't you get a hotel? I can loan you $50 toward it." My last illusion cracked. "Dad called you that quickly?" Between telling me to handle my own problems and driving to dinner. "Ryan, don't make this weird. You know how Dad is." I hung up. Standing in my father's driveway, I finally understood. No one was coming to help me. Not the father who owned multiple empty houses. Not the sister who had a perfectly good couch and 50 pity dollars. The wind picked up, cutting through my smoke-infused jacket, and for a moment, I considered just walking into traffic. My phone buzzed. Mike from the garage. I answered mechanically. "Heard about the fire, man. You need a place to crash? My couch isn't fancy, but it's yours if you want it." A guy I'd worked with for just 8 months offered what my family wouldn't. I bit back the sudden lump in my throat. "Yeah, I managed." "That would be great." Mike's apartment wasn't much, a 1-bedroom with peeling paint and a couch that had seen better days. But he cleared space in his bathroom for my remaining toiletries and gave me a clean towel. "Stay as long as you need," he said, handing me a beer. "Had my own shit times. We gotta look out for each other." After a hot shower, I finally checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my mom, who lived 2 states away. I called her back. "Ryan, are you okay? Lisa told me about the fire." "I'm okay, Mom. Staying with a friend from work." "Why didn't you call your father? He has those empty houses." The simple question broke something in me. "I did, Mom. He told me to handle my own problems." Silence hung on the line. "He wouldn't do that," she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. He said, and I quote, "You're a grown man, Ryan. Handle your own problems." Then left for dinner with the Bradleys. "Oh, Ryan, I'm so sorry. I wish I could help, but the trailer's barely big enough for me and Carl." "It's okay, Mom. I'll figure it out." After hanging up, I stared at the ceiling above Mike's couch. My life had literally gone up in flames, and the man who could most easily help me, who had benefited from generational wealth his entire life, couldn't be bothered to put a roof over his son's head for even one night. 3 days later, I was sitting in the insurance office, learning that my renter's policy would cover maybe 60% of what I'd lost. The claims adjuster looked apologetic. "I wish I had better news, Mr. Morris. But you were underinsured for electronics and specialty items." As I walked out with my preliminary paperwork, my phone rang. "Dad, Ryan, your mother says you're being dramatic about this whole fire situation." "No hello. No how are you? You need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps." That's what I did. I stopped walking. An elderly woman nearly bumped into me and shot me a dirty look. "Pull yourself up by your bootstraps? Dad, you inherited 6 buildings from Grandpa. You've never had to struggle a day in your life." "That's completely untrue. I've worked hard, at a job you didn't need, while collecting rent checks from properties you didn't earn." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "And now one of your kids loses everything in a fire, and you can't even offer a spare property for a couple weeks. Those properties are investments, Ryan. I'm not running a charity. A charity? I'm your son, and you're 31 years old. At your age, I was already collecting rent from buildings your father gave you. I finished for him, while I'm trying to rebuild from nothing. He sighed that familiar disapproving sigh. We're having dinner at the Capitol Grill on Sunday. Family meeting about this attitude of yours. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. He hung up before I could tell him what he could do with his family meeting. Sunday arrived, and against my better judgment, I found myself at the Capitol Grill. Dad had reserved a private room, which seemed excessive until I walked in and saw not just him and Lisa, but my mother, her husband Carl, my Aunt Patricia, and Uncle Bill. An ambush, then. Ryan, honey. Mom rushed to hug me. I let her, but my eyes were on my father, who sat at the head of the table, swirling a glass of scotch. Glad you could make it, Dad said, as if I had any choice. We need to clear the air. I took the only remaining seat, directly across from him. The server came for drink orders, and I asked for water, earning a raised eyebrow from my father. Nothing stronger? After your week. I drove here, I said flatly, and I'm trying to save money. Lisa shifted uncomfortably. Her husband wasn't present, conveniently. Once the server left, Dad leaned forward. Ryan, your mother tells me you've been spreading some rather unflattering characterizations of me. Is telling the truth, spreading characterizations now? Aunt Patricia cleared her throat. Ryan, honey, we're just concerned. Your father says you're blaming him for your situation. I looked around the table. My situation is that my apartment burned down in an electrical fire that wasn't my fault. I lost everything I own. My father, who owns multiple empty properties, refused to let me stay in one temporarily. I'm curious what part of that isn't factual. You're twisting things, Lisa interjected. Dad worked hard for those properties. I stared at her. He inherited them from Grandpa. How is that working hard? I've maintained them, Dad said defensively. I couldn't help but laugh. Maintain them? They're falling apart. The last time I drove by the Monroe Street property, the porch was collapsing. That's business, he said dismissively. Sometimes you let properties appreciate naturally. While collecting rent from the others, I added, and refusing to help your son who lost everything. Ryan, my mother said softly, your father has always provided for who, Mom? Not for me. Not when I needed help with college. Not when my car broke down last year. And definitely not now. Dad slammed his hand on the table. I'm not going to sit here and be attacked for my success. Your success was handed to you. The words exploded out of me. Grandpa left you those buildings, and you've done nothing but collect checks while they rot. Meanwhile, I'm sleeping on a couch because you couldn't be bothered to help your own son after a fire. The table fell silent. A folded slip of paper caught my eye by my water glass. I picked it up, thinking it was the menu. It wasn't. It was a check for $500 made out to me, signed by my father. What's this? I asked, though I knew exactly what it was. To help you get back on your feet, Dad said, his tone suggesting I should be grateful. See? I do help. I stared at the check. $500. After I'd lost almost everything I owned. From a man who owned 6 properties outright and took luxury European vacations every year. Slowly, deliberately, I tore the check in half. Ryan, my mother gasped. I don't want your guilt money, I said, placing the torn pieces on the table. I want you to acknowledge that you've had every advantage in life, advantages you refuse to extend to your own children, and then have the audacity to tell me to pull myself up by my bootstraps. Now you're just being childish, Lisa said. I turned to her. When's the last time you asked Dad for help, Lisa? When you needed a down payment for your house? Did he give you a check for $500 and tell you to figure it out? Her silence was telling. That's different, Dad interjected. She was buying a home. That's an investment. And me needing a place to live after losing everything isn't worth investing in? I stood up. You know what? I'm done. I've spent my entire life thinking I was somehow less than, somehow not good enough, because my own father wouldn't help me when I needed it. But now I see that it was never about me being worthy. It's about you being selfish. Aunt Patricia reached for my arm. Ryan, please, we're family. I pulled away. Family doesn't let family sleep in their car after a fire. A guy I've worked with for less than a year offered me his couch without hesitation. That's more family than I've seen here. You always were dramatic, Dad said dismissively. Just like your mother. Mom flinched. Carl put a protective arm around her. I'm not being dramatic, I said, my voice finally steady. I'm seeing clearly for the first time. And what I see is that you care more about money than you do about me. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Don't worry, I won't ask for anything again. Not your help, not your money, not your time. I'm going to rebuild my life without any of it. And without you. The following week was a blur of insurance paperwork, shopping for essentials at thrift stores, and searching for a new apartment. Mike continued to insist I stay as long as needed. Any news from the family front? He asked one evening as we shared pizza on his couch. Radio silence, I said, which is fine by me. My phone buzzed with a text. Lisa, Dad's really hurt by what you said. You should apologize. I showed Mike the message. Wow, he said. They're really something. I typed back. I'm still sleeping on a couch after losing everything. But sure, Dad's feelings are what matter right now. She responded immediately. That's your choice. He offered you money. She's unbelievable, Mike muttered, reading over my shoulder. Another text appeared. Family dinner this Sunday. Mom's coming down again. Dad says it's your last chance to make things right. I didn't respond, just put the phone down and took another slice of pizza. You going? Mike asked. No. The certainty in my voice surprised even me. I'm done performing for his approval. 2 weeks after the fire, I found a small apartment I could afford. The insurance money finally came through, enough to buy basic furniture and clothes, though far short of replacing everything. On moving day, Mike and 3 other guys from the garage helped me move the few possessions I'd acquired. We had just finished when a sleek black Mercedes pulled up outside. Dad, I watched through the window as he sat in his car for a long moment before finally getting out. He straightened his golf shirt and walked to my door with the confident stride of a man used to getting his way. The knock came. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Ryan. He nodded stiffly. Your mother said this is your new place. It is. He glanced past me at the sparse furniture, the thrift store couch, the folding table serving as a dining area. His expression was unreadable. You missed dinner last Sunday, he said, as if that were the most pressing issue. I was busy rebuilding my life. He sighed. Ryan, I understand you're upset. I'm not upset, Dad. I'm done. Done with what, exactly? Pretending. Pretending that you care. Pretending that we have a normal father-son relationship. Pretending that you'd be there if I really needed you. I leaned against the doorframe. The fire burned away more than my possessions. It burned away my illusions. He frowned. You're being melodramatic. No, I'm being honest. Maybe for the first time. I straightened up. What do you want, Dad? Why are you here? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a check. Bigger than the last one. I could tell from the paper quality. Your mother thought this might help more. He held it out. 2,000. I didn't take it. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? Frustration edged into his voice. I wanted a father who would help his son in a crisis. But it's too late for that now. So you'll throw away 20 years of relationship over one mistake. I almost laughed. One mistake? Dad, you've been making the same mistake my entire life. Choosing yourself, your comfort, your money over your children. The fire just made it impossible to ignore anymore. He shoved the check back in his pocket. When you're done with this pity party, let me know. As he turned to go, I called after him. You know what the worst part is? It wouldn't have cost you anything. Nothing but a little compassion to let me use one of those empty houses for a few weeks. But you couldn't even do that. He paused, but didn't turn around. Those houses are my retirement. And I'm your son. At least I was. Dad walked back to his Mercedes without another word. I watched him drive away, feeling a strange mixture of grief and liberation. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ryan, this is Karen Bradley. Your father just called James in tears. What happened? I stared at the message in disbelief. The Bradleys, his dinner companions the night of the fire, were now involved in our family drama? I typed back, Mrs. Bradley, with all due respect, this is between me and my father. Her response was swift. He says you've disowned him over money. That's not the Ryan we know. I took a deep breath and typed, my apartment burned down. He refused to let me stay in one of his empty properties. A coworker I've known for 8 months offered me his couch without hesitation. Draw your own conclusions. She didn't respond. 3 days later, I was at work when my phone rang. Mom, Ryan, have you seen the Facebook post? What Facebook post? The one your father made. About you. I felt a chill. I don't use Facebook much. What does it say? She hesitated. It's not good, honey. He's telling everyone you demanded money from him after your apartment fire, and when he wouldn't give you what you wanted, you cut him off. My hands gripped the phone tighter. That's not what happened. I know, honey. I tried to tell him to take it down, but... Her voice trailed off. But he doesn't listen to you either, I finished for her. After work, I went to the library to use a computer. Sure enough, there it was, hard life lesson today. My son has decided to cut off all contact because I wouldn't give him enough money after his apartment fire. Sometimes as parents we have to let our children learn independence, even when it hurts. Prayers appreciated during this difficult time. 47 sympathetic comments. 6 shares. His golf buddies and neighbors rallying around him. The unfairness of it burned worse than the fire had. Not only had he refused to help me in my moment of need, but now he was publicly painting himself as the victim. I stared at the screen, at the distorted version of reality he'd created, and finally understood something fundamental. My father wasn't just selfish. He lived in a completely different reality, one where he was always the hero of the story, no matter whose suffering he caused. I logged out without commenting. There was no winning that game. 6 months passed. I rebuilt my life piece by piece. New apartment, new clothes, new furniture. None of it as nice as what I'd had before, but it was mine. I picked up extra shifts at the garage and started taking community college classes in business management. I hadn't spoken to my father or Lisa since that day at my apartment. Mom called occasionally, careful to avoid mentioning Dad. It was an uneasy peace. Then came the certified letter. Notice of property opportunity. One opened it cautiously, expecting more insurance paperwork. Instead, I found a formal notice that one of my father's properties, the one on Monroe Street with the collapsing porch, was being condemned by the city. As next of kin, I was being offered right of first refusal if I wanted to purchase and rehabilitate it before the city took action. The letter had been forwarded from my old address. The property in question was the one closest to where I now lived, a fact that felt like the universe's idea of a joke. I drove by it that evening. The 2-story Craftsman had good bones, but years of neglect had taken their toll. The roof sagged, the porch listed dangerously, and plywood covered most windows. Yet something about it called to me. This house, like me, had been abandoned by my father. I called the number on the letter. This is Ryan Morris. I received a notice about 1423 Monroe Street. Yes, Mr. Morris. The property requires substantial rehabilitation to meet code. Current estimate for necessary repairs is approximately $80,000. The city is prepared to offer assistance through our neighborhood revitalization program if you're interested in taking ownership. Taking ownership? I don't understand. My father owns it. According to our records, George Morris has failed to respond to multiple citations and appears to have abandoned the property. As next of kin, you have priority if you wish to rehabilitate it. I sat with that information. Dad had simply given up on it? After refusing to let me stay there? What exactly would this program provide? I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. Low-interest loans, tax incentives, and technical assistance. The property has historical significance, so there are additional grants available if you restore rather than demolish. I found myself scheduling a walkthrough for the following day, more out of curiosity than serious intent. The house was in worse shape inside than out. Water damage, animal infestations, collapsed ceilings. But the inspector pointed out the solid foundation, the original woodwork, the potential. These craftsman homes were built to last, she said. With the right investment, this could be something special again. I ran the numbers that night. With my savings, the insurance money I hadn't yet spent, and the city's program, it was just within reach. Barely. It would be the hardest thing I'd ever done. But something about saving what my father had abandoned felt right. I signed the paperwork a week later. That same day, a text from Lisa. Dad's selling all the properties. Says he's done with the headache. Thought you should know. I stared at the message. After decades of collecting rent and letting the buildings decay, he was washing his hands of them. Probably because the city was finally holding him accountable. I didn't respond to Lisa. Instead, I drove to the Monroe Street house, my house now, and sat on the crumbling front steps. The enormity of what I'd taken on settled over me. Months of hard work ahead. Years of payments. A commitment to something much bigger than myself. But also, a chance to rebuild not just a house, but my life. On my terms. Without waiting for help that would never come. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Ryan? It's your father. My hand tightened around the phone. What do you want? I heard you bought the Monroe Street property. He sounded puzzled. Why would you do that? It's a money pit. Maybe I saw something in it worth saving. It would have been cheaper to let the city take it and buy something else, he said, ever practical. I'm selling the others, you know, getting out while the market's decent. So Lisa told me. Listen. He paused. Since you're so interested in real estate suddenly, I could sell you one of the others. Something in better shape. Family discount. I almost laughed. After everything, he was trying to make a sale. I'm good with this one. Thanks. Ryan, don't be stubborn. That house needs at least $100,000 in repairs. Then it's a good thing I'm not afraid of hard work. He sighed. I'm trying to help you here. No, I said calmly. You're trying to sell me something. There's a difference. This attitude of yours, Dad, I interrupted. I have to go. I have a house to fix up. I ended the call and looked up at the broken windows and sagging roof of my new home. It needed everything: new wiring, new plumbing, new roof, structural repairs. But unlike my father, I wasn't going to abandon it. 1 year later, I stood on the front porch of 1423 Monroe Street. The porch no longer sagged, the roof no longer leaked. The windows gleamed with new glass. Inside, the original hardwood floors shone after careful restoration, and the woodwork had been painstakingly brought back to life. Mike and the guys from the garage had helped with the heavy lifting. Mom had come down twice to help paint. Even a few neighbors had pitched in, excited to see the old eyesore transformed. Dad and Lisa had never visited. I'd done most of the work myself, learning as I went. YouTube tutorials, weekend workshops at the hardware store, advice from contractors who took pity on the young guy tackling such a big project. Every nail I drove, every board I replaced felt like an act of defiance against my father's neglect. Today was inspection day. If the house passed, I could finally move in. The inspector walked through methodically, checking outlets, testing water pressure, examining the roof. At the end, she handed me the paperwork with a smile. Congratulations, Mr. Morris. One of the best renovations I've seen in this program. As she drove away, I sat on the porch steps, sturdy now, no longer crumbling, and let myself feel the weight of the accomplishment. I'd taken something broken and made it whole again. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. How did the inspection go? I sent her a thumbs-up emoji and a picture of the approved paperwork. So proud of you. She replied, Carl, and I will visit next month. Another text arrived, this one from Lisa. Dad saw your house on his way to golf today. Said it looks adequate. I smiled. Adequate was high praise from George Morris. I didn't respond to Lisa. Instead, I took a photo of myself on the porch, smiling, keys in hand, and posted it publicly on Facebook, something I rarely did. 1 year ago, I lost everything in an apartment fire. Today, I'm a homeowner. No handouts, no inheritance, just hard work and determination. Sometimes the worst moments of your life lead to the best opportunities. Hashtag new beginnings. I didn't mention my father. I didn't need to. The house standing sturdy and beautiful behind me said everything about who had abandoned it and who had saved it. As the sun set on my first official day as a homeowner, I walked through the quiet rooms, running my hands over the smooth surfaces I'd sanded, the walls I'd painted, the floors I'd refinished. This place had been left to rot by someone who had every advantage but couldn't be bothered to care for what he'd been given. I would be different. I had rebuilt this house, and in the process, rebuilt myself. My phone buzzed again. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Ryan, this is James Bradley. Your father came by for dinner tonight, quite upset about your social media post. He feels you're deliberately trying to embarrass him. Would you consider taking it down as a gesture of goodwill? I stared at the message, incredulous. After everything, the refusal to help after the fire, the public Facebook post painting me as greedy, the year of silence, this was their concern? That my celebration of hard work might embarrass a man who had done nothing to help? I typed back, Mr. Bradley, my post doesn't mention my father at all. It's about my journey from losing everything to becoming a homeowner. If he feels embarrassed by that, perhaps he should examine why. I put the phone away without waiting for a response and walked onto my new porch. The street was quiet, the evening air cool. From here, I could see the house next door where a young family lived. They brought me cookies when I was working on the roof last summer. This was community. This was what mattered. Not the approval of a man who had everything and gave nothing. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. Tomorrow, I would move my few possessions from my apartment to this house. I would begin the next chapter of my life in a home I had saved. a home I had earned through my own sweat and determination. My father could keep his properties and his pride. I had found something far more valuable, the knowledge that I could lose everything and still rebuild, stronger than before. And not a single empty rental house from George Morris had been required. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.